Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a merchant, a soldier, or a sahib sipping tea on a shaded veranda. You're a factory worker in British-ruled India, which is to say, you're a body with lungs, fingers, and a quota. You're not here because you dreamed of this. You're here because someone higher on the chain decided your village owed tax, your caste fit the task, and your labour could be turned into revenue. The factory doesn't care about your story. It cares about output. And whether your breath catches from heat stroke or from the opium fumes, well, the ledger doesn't have a column for that. Before your shift starts and your hands begin their slow descent into chemical stain and skin rot, do me a small favour. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I like knowing which corners of the world are drifting off to the scent of empire and the sound of unpaid labour. And if you'd like early access to more slow, grim bedtime histories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable, let's begin. You arrive in Patna the way most people do, quietly, sore-footed, and without ceremony. The road that brings you here is not paved in ambition or even intent. It's packed dust, edged with scrub, walked thin by others just like you. Too poor to argue, too tired to dream. You don't know whose decision led you here exactly. Maybe it was the tax collector who spoke with soft authority about what your family owed. Maybe it was the landlord who raised your rent after the rains didn't come. Maybe it was your uncle who said the factory paid something and that something was more than starvation. In any case, you're here now, and the building ahead of you makes no effort to welcome or explain itself. The Patna Opium Factory isn't a place you'd notice from a distance, and that's by design. It's not grand, it's not Gothic. It doesn't loom the way temples or palaces do. It squats, low, long, and industrial, a series of warehouses stitched together with soot-dark chimneys and sweating stone walls. The British call it the largest opium factory in the world, as if that's a compliment. But it's not a factory in the sense of gears and machines and gleaming steel. It's a human factory, a place where bodies are the moving parts, where labour is measured in weight and breath, and how many bricks of concentrated addiction you can produce before your fingers crack open. There is no front gate with a nameplate, no plaque commemorating your arrival. Just a guard who barely looks up, a clerk with a ledger thicker than your thigh, and a low wall built less to keep people out than to keep people in. No one welcomes you. They just assume you'll fall into place. And you do. Not because you're submissive, not because you're docile, but because you already know what happens to people who don't. You've seen it in your neighbours, in the man from your village who left last year and came back too thin to cast a shadow. You remember the way he looked at food, like it was a rumour. You remember the cough. You never asked what happened to him. You already knew. Inside the compound smells like a wound, not fresh, old, treated with vinegar and left in the sun. There's the scent of sweat, of burnt oil, of something sticky and plant-based that clings to your nostrils and settles in the folds of your clothes. It doesn't go away, this smell. You'll carry it home, on your skin, in your hair, on the backs of your teeth. You'll get used to it, or at least stop noticing. Either way, it becomes part of you, like heat stroke or exhaustion, constant, familiar, and never truly gone. You're ushered toward a low building where your presence will be officially noted, if not acknowledged. There's a table, a clerk, and a system older than the country that's running it. You tell them your name. They write down something else. It doesn't matter. You're not here to be remembered. You're here to be recorded. A number is assigned. Your caste is logged. Your village is written down. Not so anyone can send you letters, but so they can tally up labour quotas when they need more bodies. You're asked no questions. You volunteer no information. You sign nothing. Consent is implied by your hunger. You glance around and see others like you, Young men, older boys, a few women with the sun permanently etched into their skin. No one talks, no one needs to. You're all here for the same reason, even if the path looked different. Some came because their land was taxed until it disappeared. Some because their husbands or fathers drank away the last of the rice. Some because a British officer came to their village with polite threats and made it sound like employment. You've heard the word opportunity used before. This isn't it. This is obligation in a different accent. There are rules, of course. None of them are written in a language you read, but they're made clear through tone, repetition, and the example of what happens when they're broken. Don't be late. Don't talk back. Don't touch what isn't assigned to your station. Don't collapse. The last one isn't a rule technically, but you can see how quickly collapsed bodies are removed. Not with violence, with indifference. Like clearing debris, you're assigned a place to sleep, if it can be called that. It's a shared space, cramped and low to the ground, with mats made of reed and burlap. There's no fan, no breeze, just the collective warmth of too many bodies and not enough hope. You drop your bag, if you had one, and sit. You try not to think about how long you'll be here. There's no end date, no contract, just the vague understanding that you'll be paid a few annas per day and that the work is better than nothing. You already suspect that's a lie, but you'll find out soon enough. The factory doesn't shout at you. It doesn't whip or scream. It doesn't need to. It waits, calmly. Like a river that knows how many have drowned before you. Like a road that knows how many feet have bled on its stones. You sit there, number freshly assigned, lungs still unscarred, watching the sun set behind a chimney, already coughing smoke. You're not a prisoner, but you are very much not free. And the work hasn't even started yet. Before your hands ever touch the poppy gum, before the fumes sink into your chest or the sweat soaks through your shirt, someone writes you down. Not in a book of honour, not on a plaque, in a ledger, a thick, stiff-bound volume that smells of ink, mould, and bureaucratic indifference. It doesn't matter if your name is spelled right, or even spelled the same way twice. It doesn't matter if the clerk understands your language, or if the man recording you looks up from his chair. The process isn't for you, it's for them. You are being translated into units, into recordable, sortable, billable labour. They ask you questions, but not with interest. Your name, your father's name, your village, your caste, your age, or something close enough to it. You answer quietly, and they write what they hear, not what you say. If they ask you to repeat yourself, it isn't because they care about accuracy. It's because they missed a syllable and need to make sure the number matches the body. You're not corrected. You're not thanked. You're given a number, written on a slip of coarse paper, and logged in the register beside a series of tick marks, fractions, and abbreviations that you do not understand. The number matters more than your face. It's what they'll call when wages are issued. It's what they'll mark down when the daily quota is reviewed. When someone collapses, they don't shout your name. They shout your number. Sometimes they don't shout at all. Just underline it once, in red, and move to the next. You start to wonder if the ledger is the real person here, and you're just the smudge next to its footnote. You exist so that it can stay full. Your caste is entered without question. They don't need to test or verify it. Your accent, your clothing, your skin tone, even the way you hold yourself, are already catalogued by someone trained in colonial taxonomy. If you're low caste, your duties will involve more contact with the raw gum, more skin exposure, less supervision. If you're upper caste, you'll be steered toward clerical work or light sorting, something less degrading. But only if there's space. For most, the difference is academic. You still breathe the same air. You still sweat through the same cloth. But the hierarchy is preserved, written down in black ink and treated like divine truth. There are columns in the ledger for everything: age bracket, caste designation, work assignment, last recorded absence, estimated output per shift. It is a system designed to ensure that no one becomes anything more than predictable. The British call it efficiency. You call it flattening. Your life, with all its private humiliations and tiny hopes, has been collapsed into a few short lines in a book that you're never allowed to read. Somewhere in that book is a space for your death too, not immediately, but eventually. They'll record the date. The reason will be vague, heat stroke, fatigue, illness, but it'll be there, written in the same tidy hand. Once you're logged, you're marked physically. Sometimes it's ink on your wrist, temporary and crude. Sometimes it's a tag, tied with string and pinned through your tunic. You feel ridiculous wearing it, like livestock, but you learn quickly that not wearing it is worse. Without it, you're not a worker. You're a vagrant. You're not docked pay. You're removed entirely. The system has no time for anomalies. The building where all this happens is not grand. Just a low room with barred windows and a slanted desk. But inside, power hums. Not violently, not loudly, just constantly. The clerks sit higher than you. The paper sits higher than them. The man with the ink pot is in no rush. He'll log a dozen more names after you and forget each one in the time it takes the page to dry. You're not given a tour. You're not told what to expect. A supervisor gestures vaguely in the direction of a long corridor, and you follow it because there's nothing else to do. As you walk, you pass other workers in varying stages of fatigue. Some are barefoot, some wear headscarves soaked with sweat. No one meets your eyes. They don't ignore you to be cruel. They ignore you because they already know how this ends. And it doesn't end with friendship or camaraderie. It ends with your number crossed out, and someone else assigned your place. You don't feel like a criminal, but you're processed like one. There is no trial, no defense, just documentation. The machinery of empire runs on paper, and ink is cheaper than mercy. You realize now that the real work hasn't even begun. This is just the administration of your usefulness, a warm-up, an orientation without speech. The most human part of the process is already over. By the time you leave the registration hall, you're not the person who walked in. That person had a name, a past, maybe even a story worth telling. The one leaving has a number, a quota, and a place on the factory floor. You haven't been stripped bare. You've been clothed in something worse. Anonymity wrapped in arithmetic. From now on, when someone calls out across the compound, they won't say, you. They'll say the number written in the margin of a book you'll never hold. And you will answer, because if you don't, someone else will. You're sent back to the dormitory with nothing else. No instructions, no warning, no sense of how early the morning will come. You lie down on the same mat, still wearing the tag with your new number, and close your eyes beneath a roof that leaks more dread than rain. Sleep comes slowly, but it comes. The bell doesn't chime, it clatters, a dull metallic warning that the day has already started without you. It's not melodic, it's not ceremonial. It rings the way hunger gnaws, consistent, disinterested, and impossible to ignore. You wake with your jaw clenched and your joints unwilling. There's no sunrise to greet, just a dim greyness leaking through the cracks in the dormitory walls and the shifting weight of the bodies around you as others rise, rub their faces, and shuffle toward the door. No one speaks. Words take energy. Energy takes food, and you'll need both for the shift ahead. You roll up your mat and tuck it under a corner so it doesn't disappear while you're gone. Theft isn't common exactly, but nothing truly belongs to anyone here. What isn't used quickly is used by someone else. You splash water on your face from a communal basin, careful not to drink. The taste of the factory clings to the water, metallic and earthy, as if it remembers the poppy fields and resents what you've done to them. You dry your hands on your tunic. It's already stained from the day before. It always is. There's no such thing as clean clothes in this place, only slightly less ruined ones. By the time you step outside, the courtyard is already half filled with figures just like you, barefoot or in worn sandals, bent at the waist from sleep or age or both. No one is running. There's no point. The factory bell doesn't punish lateness with urgency. It punishes it with docked pay, cold stares, and the quiet subtraction of privileges you barely noticed you had. You walk, slowly, sore already before work even begins. Your back remembers yesterday's lifting. Your knees remember the crouching. Your lungs remember the smoke. The smell hits you before you reach the gate. It's not new, it never is. But each morning, it asserts itself again, like a reminder of who's really in charge. It's not just the poppy, though that alone would be enough. It's the oil from the presses, the reek of human waste from the open drains, the acrid tang of lime used to wash down the packing floors, and something else that's harder to name. A sour, sticky humidity that settles into your skin and makes you feel like you've never bathed in your life. You don't smell like a person anymore. You smell like process. You line up at the main entrance, pressed between bodies, all of you avoiding eye contact because the day is already too long. A clerk with a chalkboard calls numbers. Not names. Names would require memory. Numbers are easier to erase. Yours comes up. You nod. You shuffle forward. Someone marks you present with a thin line on a tally sheet. And that's it. You now exist for today. Only for today. If you don't show tomorrow, you'll be reclassified as absent, then delinquent, then forgotten. Inside the compound, the sound changes. It's not loud, not yet. Just a low thrum of wooden doors, of footsteps on brick, of the first echoes of movement from the processing rooms. You pass by an older worker sweeping the floor. He doesn't look up. He's done this too many times. His broom is worn nearly to the handle. He pushes it in the same tired arc with the same tired rhythm. You wonder how many years it took to become invisible, even while moving. Probably fewer than you'd like to believe. The path to your station isn't marked. You just know it. You've been told once and expected to remember. If you forget, you'll be told again, but not kindly. You pass the drying yard, where rows of opium bricks from yesterday's shift sit under tarps, their surfaces hardening in the sun like old wax. The guards watch those piles more closely than they watch the workers. Each brick is counted, weighed, and reweighed. You're not trusted with them until they're worthless to anyone but the British. Your feet stick slightly as you walk, not from mud, but from the residue that builds up in the crevices of the stone floors. Layers of crushed poppy, spilled gum, dust and sweat baked into something between glue and rot. You don't look down anymore. You don't need to. The path is memorized by pain. Each twist in the corridor, each uneven tile, each loose shutter in the wall that creaks when the wind hits it, just so. You know them all like scars. The others around you are just as silent. The silence isn't fear, not exactly. It's preservation. If you waste energy talking, you pay for it later. In sweat, in breath, in sore hands that can't keep up with the pace. There's a kind of camaraderie in the quiet. Not friendship, not warmth, just shared understanding. You nod to someone you vaguely recognise. You're not sure from where. Maybe from your dormitory, maybe from yesterday's sorting table. He nods back. That's enough. As you near the main hall, the heat intensifies. The sun hasn't fully risen, but the building is already warmer than outside. The brick absorbs the night's sweat and gives it back in waves. You feel it on your neck, your ribs, the backs of your knees. By midday, it will be worse. The air inside doesn't move. It thickens, becomes something you have to push against just to breathe. You've learned to take shallow breaths here. Deep ones invite too much of whatever it is that coats your throat and settles in your lungs like sediment. You reach your post just before the second bell, the one that means labour, not attendance. The overseer walks past without looking at you. That's good. If he looks, something's wrong. You sit on the mat you've been using all week. It smells like the floor and feels like fatigue. You flex your fingers, already aching, already sticky. The raw gum is waiting, dark and heavy, in its clay pot. The tools are beside it, blunt, stained, indifferent. You hear someone cough behind you, a wet rattling sound that goes ignored. And then, as if pulled forward by gravity, the day begins. You don't remember exactly when the air started hurting, not because it wasn't immediate, but because your brain tries to make it feel gradual, like your body is easing into something, adjusting, adapting, but it isn't. The moment you enter the processing hall, it's already too late. The air is wrong, heavy, dense, sweet in a way that doesn't comfort. It fills your nose with something between molasses and mildew, not the scent of food, but of something rotting slowly into profit. It coats the back of your throat and sinks into your lungs like wet cloth. You breathe because you have to, but your body resents it. The heat is constant. You expected that. The building is built to trap it. Thick walls, low ceilings, and windows too narrow to let in more than frustration. By midday, the walls sweat. The floor sweats. You sweat. The temperature doesn't spike. It simmers. The air doesn't move. There are no fans, no cross breezes, just bodies. Dozens of them, packed into the space with barely a metre between each. Bent over vats and trays and piles of drying gum. Every breath feels like breathing through gauze soaked in syrup and dust. And then there are the fumes. You don't know exactly what's in them, not the full list. You've heard words whispered. Lime, ammonia, smoke from poppy resin being dried too fast, maybe even traces of whatever's used to clean the equipment. No one explains. You're not told to wear a mask because there aren't any. You're not told to take breaks because breaks slow production. What matters is the quantity of product at the end of the shift. What happens to your lungs in the meantime is considered incidental. The first time it makes you cough, the sound surprises you. It's not a dry cough. It's thick, dragging, like something being scraped loose from inside. No one reacts, not even the man sitting closest to you. He's older, probably 10 years your senior, and he's been doing this long enough to know the rhythm. He coughs once every few minutes, always into his sleeve, always in the same way, like it's part of the job, like it's a reflex as standard as breathing. You begin to mimic it without realizing. After a few hours, your own cough has joined the background noise of the hall, indistinct and ignored. You work close to one of the larger vats today. It's open and shallow, with a layer of half-processed opium resin spread across its surface, like oil-slicked mud. The smell rises steadily, thick, intoxicating, wrong. Not seductive like the poppy fields, not medicinal like a tonic, just cloying. It makes your head feel loose. Not dizzy exactly, just detached. Like you're watching your hands move from a small distance. The foreman warned you once not to get too close to the steam. Not out of concern, out of efficiency. If you faint and fall in, it delays the batch. The walls of the processing hall are stained, not just with dirt or mould, but with the residue of years of exhaled gum and oil, a film that can't be washed off. You see handprints in places where no one should be leaning, streaks from where someone braced themselves mid-collapse, marks left not as rebellion, but as accident, the byproduct of bodies pushed 1 hour too far. The ceilings are high enough to suggest ventilation, but you know better. The air stays, it settles into your clothes, your skin, and eventually, your blood. No one talks in here unless absolutely necessary. Not because it's forbidden, because talking requires breath. And breath is something you ration now. You speak only when you can afford to. When someone does break the silence, a cough that turns into a wheeze, a brief exchange about who's fetching more gum, the voices sound distant, like they're echoing through wool. You stop noticing whose voice is whose. Everyone begins to sound the same once the air takes hold. You wonder if it's the opium itself making you feel like this, or just the smell of it cooked and stirred and dried into something almost, but not quite, smoke. You've heard stories that the drug can seep into you just from handling it. That long exposure numbs the senses and clouds the mind. That's supposed to be a risk for smugglers and addicts, not factory workers. But you don't feel sharp anymore. Your thoughts come slower. You lose track of time more easily. Your eyes sting without crying. You're not addicted, you're just surrounded. The overseer walks by at one point, and you straighten instinctively. Not because he'll punish you for slouching, though he might. It's more that your body now associates his presence with evaluation. His nose is accustomed to the smell. His shirt is clean, always. He doesn't linger near the vats. He doesn't need to. His job is to watch, not to inhale. You envy that. You hate that you envy that. He coughs once, almost theatrically, and mutters something about airflow. You nearly laugh, but not too loudly. Your lungs won't let you. By the time your shift is half over, you've stopped noticing the pain. Not because it's gone, but because it's settled. The tightness in your chest isn't a spasm anymore. It's just the new shape of breathing. Your throat scratches with every exhale, your tongue feels coated, and your nose is clogged not with dust, but with scent. You keep working. You keep shaping and stirring and lifting and pressing. You don't think about it anymore. That would take energy you don't have. Later, when you step out into the daylight, if it can be called that, the outside air will feel thin and sharp, almost cruel in its clarity. You'll gasp at it, cough again, and wonder how long it will take before that air starts to hurt too. You don't sit in a chair. There are no chairs. There are mats if you're lucky. Otherwise, you crouch on your haunches like your ancestors did. Not out of reverence for tradition, but because the factory never invested in comfort. Comfort is inefficient. So you squat, back curled, knees creaking, arms braced against your thighs. The position hurts less than standing, but more than nothing. After a few hours, your feet fall asleep, and your hips feel like they've aged decades. That's normal. Everyone around you looks the same, folded inward, joint by joint, like laundry with breath. In front of you is the gum. Not in neat blocks, not yet. Just a heavy, sticky mass that smells like scorched honey and sewage. It oozes slowly from its container, spreading across the clay slab like it's trying to escape. You reach into it with a wooden paddle, not a tool of precision, just something shaped to stir and scrape. It sticks to everything. Your hands, your arms, your knees when you adjust position. It clings with the urgency of rot and doesn't let go. You'll scrub later, but the smell never leaves. It gets into your pores, into your teeth, into places no soap can reach. Your hands are already stained. Everyone's are. After the first week, the tips of your fingers turn brown, then nearly black. Not from dye, not from dirt, from absorption, from contact, from scraping gum off stone, off trays, off your own skin. You watch your nails darken, crack, peel, and then reform. The factory gives no gloves. If you ask, they'll say you don't need them. They'll say the British soldiers in China handled the product bare-handed too. They won't mention how many of them lost their fingertips, or how many went home with lungs full of resin and silence. You try to be careful. You try not to waste. The overseer doesn't need to hover. The quota does that for him. You're expected to process a fixed amount per day, no exceptions. Too much gum left in your tray, you get docked, gum stuck to your tool, that's your fault. If you work fast, you're watched. If you work slow, you're watched harder. There's no right speed, only barely acceptable and borderline punishable. Most workers settle into a rhythm, somewhere between exhaustion and fear. You mimic them until it becomes your own. The tools are not sharp. That would be dangerous. A sharp edge means more accidents, more bleeding, more contamination. So everything is dull. The paddles, the scrapers, the shaping moulds. That means more pressure, more friction, more work. The wooden edges tear at the gum and at your skin. Blisters form, then split, then heal into something rougher. You develop calluses not from pride, but from survival. They don't protect you. They just mean the damage goes deeper before you feel it. Occasionally, you nick yourself. A small cut from a jagged board, a splinter that works its way under your nail. You try not to flinch. Blood is a problem. If it gets in the gum, it has to be discarded. You don't get punished for bleeding exactly. You get punished for loss of material. A few drops can ruin a tray's worth of product, and that's money the factory won't lose lightly. You learn to keep wounds covered, hidden, ignored. Infection is your concern, not theirs. Some of the older workers wear bandages, thin, soiled strips of cloth wrapped around their fingers, more symbolic than sanitary. You copy them when your hands begin to split. The cloth clings when wet and stiffens when dry. By midday, it smells like the rest of you, sour, bitter, chemical. You don't complain. Complaining isn't banned. It's just ineffective. The man 2 stations down hasn't spoken in 3 days. He still shows up. He still works. He still bleeds. That's all the factory expects. You get 1 break. It isn't timed by the clock. It's timed by routine. When the trays are full, when the bell rings, when someone higher up decides that the day has reached its midpoint. You stretch your legs and feel them tremble under your weight. You rub your hands and feel the stiffness setting in. You glance down and see the gum has worked its way under your nails again. You'll try to scrape it out tonight with a piece of wire or a fingernail from your other hand. It won't work. No one is congratulated for meeting quota. No one is thanked for diligence. Recognition is not part of the arrangement. The only reward for meeting expectations is not being punished. If you fall behind, someone will notice. Not right away, but eventually. A mark will appear in the ledger. A deduction will be made from your wages. If it happens more than once, you'll be moved to a different station. One closer to the boiling vats. One with worse air, fewer tools, more gum to handle. And if that doesn't fix the problem, you'll be dismissed. Dismissal sounds like freedom, but it isn't. It means losing your dormitory bed, your rationed meals, your water access. It means returning to whatever pushed you here in the first place. Debt, drought, hunger. So you keep working. You push your fingers deeper into the gum, even when they sting. You force the paste into moulds, shape the bricks, smooth the edges. Your hands move like they belong to someone else. Someone less tired, someone less aware. By the end of the day, you don't look at your hands anymore. You just rinse them in the same basin as everyone else, watching the water turn brown, then darker. You wipe them on your tunic and smell the gum rising from your skin like something alive. You don't feel pride. You don't feel shame. You feel residue. That's the only thing the factory leaves you with. And tomorrow, there will be more. The next day comes without announcement. No dreams, no real sleep. Just another bell, another basin of stale water, and the same gum waiting in the same tray. Your body moves before your mind catches up. The routine is already inside you. By mid-morning, your hands are sticky again, your breath shallow, and that's when you hear it. The familiar rhythm of leather soles on brick. The overseer has begun his rounds. You hear his footsteps before you see him. Not loud, not hurried, just consistent. Hard soles on hard floors, measuring distance in ownership. He doesn't speak, he doesn't have to. His presence announces itself in posture, in tempo, in the faint scrape of a clipboard across his hip. You keep your head down. Everyone does, not out of fear exactly, but out of habit. The same way you avoid staring at the sun. Too much attention draws heat. The overseer moves through the processing hall like he's auditing a part of himself. He doesn't rush, he doesn't stop. He glides past stations, occasionally pausing to write something. Never quickly, never clearly. He doesn't point out mistakes. He doesn't issue praise. He observes. That's the job. The factory may belong to the East India Company or the Crown, but the floor belongs to him. Every cough, every dropped paddle, every gram of gum that looks too dry or too moist is a note in his private symphony of control. You've never heard him raise his voice. That would imply emotion. Emotion would imply investment. Instead, he simply shifts weight when something displeases him. A half step backward, a wrinkle in the brow, a glance that lingers 1 second too long. You come to recognize these cues the way sailors watch the sky. He's not here to teach or to lead. He's here to enforce calibration. His ideal worker is silent, fast, exact, and invisible. You do your best to become that. Sometimes he stops behind you, not to speak but to measure. You hear the scratch of his pen, the turn of the page. He's logging how much gum you've processed, how clean your tools are, how closely your bricks match the mould. If he doesn't move on quickly, your stomach knots. He might circle around to the other side and peer over your shoulder, not to offer correction, to confirm suspicion. He won't say anything. He'll just underline your number in the ledger and walk away. The consequences come later. There's no conversation, not with you. He may speak to the senior clerk in English, quickly and quietly, like someone discussing the price of cattle. You don't understand most of it. Occasionally, you catch a word. Inefficient, replacement, unsanitary. You learn to associate these words with dread, the way animals learn the scent of smoke before they see the fire. You don't need to know the language to know when you're being discussed. The pause, the nod, the next day's reassignment. It's all part of the rhythm. His clothes are always clean, not perfectly pressed, the factory isn't that formal, but neat, untouched by gum, untouched by labour. His shoes never carry dust, his hands never show stain. You imagine he bathes more often than you're allowed to, that he sleeps alone, in a private room with a fan and a lock on the door. He looks healthy. That's the most frustrating part. In a place that depletes everyone, he seems untouched, preserved, like the factory draws from you so it can feed him. You once made the mistake of looking him in the eye. Just once. It was during your first week, when you were still trying to figure out what mattered. You looked up, hoping for some unspoken sign of approval. Maybe a nod, maybe a trace of human recognition. What you got instead was a pause. He saw you. And for a moment, that was the worst thing. He didn't look back with cruelty or anger, just indifference, like noticing a smudge on a window. He turned, wrote something down, and moved on. You learned your lesson. Some say he used to work the floor himself, years ago, before being promoted. Others say he was brought in from outside, a clerk's nephew or a trader's second son, given the position as part of a favour. No one knows for sure. It doesn't matter. He is what he is now, a walking reminder that the factory sees everything and remembers nothing. He holds the power to reassign, reprimand, reduce wages, or recommend removal. That's all the biography you need. He doesn't need guards, he doesn't need enforcers. His walk does the job. By the time he's passed through a room, posture has improved, output has increased, and the air feels a little thicker with effort. Workers don't speed up because they're told to. They do it because they've seen what happens to the ones who don't. Quiet removal, fewer rations, a cot that vanishes while you're on shift. The factory rarely explains. The overseer never does. You don't hate him. That would take energy you can't spare. You don't pity him either. That would take imagination. He's not a villain. He's not even a person, really. He's a role, a ritual, a piece of choreography that exists to remind you who's replaceable. You know he'll come back tomorrow. You know he'll walk the same path, stop at the same points, adjust the same papers, and you'll still be there, trying to look smaller, quieter, more productive. The bell rings again, this time softer. Not a release, just a signal. Lunch, or something that answers to that name. You stretch your legs with care, slowly at first, testing joints that feel like they've aged decades in a morning. Your hands stick to your knees as you rise. You don't notice until you try to brush them off and realise the gum has dried into the fabric. You'll deal with it later. You always do. You follow the others toward the mess area. It's not far, just another wing of the compound, shaded by a sagging awning and smelling faintly of iron and cumin. There's no queue, not formally, just a loose understanding of who eats when, based more on seniority and station than any spoken rule. You don't cut ahead, even if you're starving. No one does. Hunger doesn't excuse disrespect, and disrespect gets remembered. When you reach the front, you're handed a bowl. It's tin or aluminum, dented and warm, from repeated use. Inside, there's rice, boiled past the point of texture, bloated and clumping in the corners, and a thin dal that tastes like someone boiled lentils in a whisper of turmeric, and then strained out the flavour. Occasionally, there's a smear of ghee, barely visible, melting into the surface before you can register its presence. On festival days or when some officer visits, you might get a slice of onion or a spoon of pickle. But not today. You don't eat because it smells good. It doesn't. You don't eat because it fills you. It won't. You eat because this is the time allotted, and your stomach will take whatever it can get. You crouch or sit against a wall, trying to ignore the flies and the smell of overworked bodies, sharing the same stale patch of shade. You shovel the food in quickly, with fingers if you have to, scooping rice into your mouth before it can cool. Not because you're ravenous, though you are, but because the break is shorter than digestion. You eat fast, so you'll have time to breathe after. The food hits your stomach like an apology that comes too late. It doesn't nourish, it just occupies space. A cushion between this morning's fumes and this afternoon's labour. You've learned not to expect satisfaction. That was a luxury of your childhood, when meals meant family, flavour, even fullness. Now food is just maintenance, one more thing the factory provides, at minimum viable levels, like water, like sleep. You glance around and see the same expressions everywhere, eyes slightly unfocused, jaws working automatically, bodies slumped just far enough to suggest rest without letting the spine collapse. No one talks. The noise of the factory fades, but silence doesn't bring peace, it just makes the ache louder. You hear someone's stomach growl, even as they eat. You hear someone else cough, the same deep, tar-thick rasp that now punctuates every shift. No one reacts. These sounds are normal now. A boy sits near you, maybe 12, maybe younger. His rice is gone, but he's licking his fingers like there's something left to savour. His knuckles are stained, his elbows scraped. He doesn't look up. You don't speak to him. You never asked his name. Not because you don't care, but because the fewer names you learn, the fewer people you lose. You've seen workers collapse mid-shift. You've seen them removed quietly, the way you clear debris. You've learned not to make emotional investments in temporary structures. There's no designated time marker to end the break. Just a shift in energy. One worker stands, then another. Then the rest follow, pulled upwards like tide-bound debris. You scrape your bowl clean with a thumb and wipe your hand on your tunic. The residue clings. Everything does. You walk past the barrel where you're expected to return your bowl. You don't know if they're ever washed properly. You don't ask. Questions like that don't lead anywhere useful. As you re-enter the hall, the heat feels worse than before. Not because it is, but because you've just remembered what not heat feels like. Your body resents the return. Your stomach churns a little, adjusting to the sudden presence of food. You wonder how long it will stay down. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes someone vomits quietly in a corner, and no one stops working. Not even them. They wipe their mouth, steady their hands, and go on. You settle back into place, adjusting your mat, finding your tools. Everything is where you left it. Of course it is. Nothing in the factory changes unless someone breaks. You press your fingers into the gum again and feel it suck the moisture from your skin. Your lunch begins to feel like memory. A vague event that might not have happened at all. Only the oily taste in your mouth says otherwise. There are no conversations about the meal. No, wasn't that good. No, wish there was more. Not even sarcasm. It doesn't deserve sarcasm. It doesn't deserve commentary. It simply was, like the air or the quota or the overseer's shoes clicking past your station. You return to work with the same posture you left with. Low, quiet, automatic. Whatever that food was, it's behind you now. The gum is waiting, and so is the ledger. The packing room is cleaner than the rest of the factory. Not clean exactly, just less obviously filthy. The floors are swept, the trays are stacked. The windows, though small and coated in dust, let in a bit more light, you almost think for a moment that it feels less oppressive, but it's an illusion. The air is still thick, still chemical, still heavy with the sweet rot of processed poppy. The difference is presentation. This is the part of the factory that produces something visible, tangible, marketable, the part that leaves India. By the time the gum reaches this room, it's already been boiled, pressed and filtered. What's left is dense and dark, like overcooked molasses shaped into consistency. You don't handle raw resin anymore, you handle product. It's measured into moulds and pressed into bricks the size of small books, each one with its corners smoothed and weight checked twice. A brick that's too light is theft. A brick that's too heavy is loss. You've never seen either mistake forgiven. You're not permitted to speak here. Not for safety. Nothing in this room is more dangerous than what you've already survived. It's for control. The silence is enforced with presence. A second overseer, not the same one who walks the gum floors but similar in posture, watches over the room from a raised platform. He doesn't move much. He doesn't need to. His vantage point sees everything. If a worker speaks, they're removed. Not reprimanded, removed. Permanently or temporarily, you're never told. The silence makes every movement louder. The thud of a mould on the bench, the crackle of paper as bricks are wrapped, the creak of crates being opened, filled, nailed shut. You begin to understand why silence is preferred. It amplifies the sound of progress. Every noise is a reminder that the machine is still running. Every completed box is a sigh of approval from somewhere higher up, somewhere British, somewhere dry, and far from the stink of this room. The wrapping paper is coarse, but the ink is crisp. Black stamps, bold letters, elegant serifed names you don't recognise. Patna, Bengal, India Company Export. The destination ports are printed in English. Some you can read, most you can't. Calcutta, Rangoon, Shanghai. Some crates will reach government depots. Others will cross oceans. Some will end up in medicine shops. Others will end up in the hands of soldiers, smugglers, or starving addicts collapsing in alleyways. You'll never see. You don't know who's waiting for what you pack. You just know they're not here. Each crate is checked by two people, one native, one European. The European signs off last. He doesn't speak to you. He doesn't even face you. He walks along the rows with a pencil tucked behind one ear and a sheet of tallies in his hand. You've heard him laugh once, a tight sound, after one of the crates split open and spilled bricks across the floor. The mess took an hour to repack. No one else laughed. You sometimes wonder what happens to the bricks once they leave. Not out of curiosity, but fatigue. You want to imagine an end point, a conclusion. You want to believe the labour leads somewhere, even if that somewhere is misery. You've heard stories, half-truths from half-sober men, about what the opium does in China. That whole towns are addicted. That people sell their children for another pipe. That the British use it to keep colonies quiet. You don't know what's true. You only know what you see. Your hands shaping something that will be smoked, swallowed, or boiled into dependence. The paper cuts your fingers. The twine leaves impressions in your palms. You work slower in this room, not by choice but by necessity. Every step is checked, double-checked, observed. It's the only part of the process where perfection is expected. The gum could be sticky, the boiling uneven, but the bricks must be flawless. They are, after all, the final face of the operation. This is not just opium. This is product, commodity, exportable control. Occasionally, a British officer will visit the packing room. They wear white, always white, as if to prove that the factory doesn't touch them. Their shoes are polished, their sleeves rolled neatly. They walk the rows slowly, nodding without comment. Sometimes they inspect a brick themselves, holding it up to the light as if admiring sculpture. Then they set it back down and leave, with no words, no thanks, and no trace of where they go next. You suspect their offices are upstairs, or across the compound, or in a different building entirely, one with better ventilation and fewer workers. When the crate is full, you and 2 others lift it. It takes coordination and silence. One wrong move and the lid won't align. One jolt and the paper bricks tear. You lower it onto the dolly with care and step back. The crate is nailed shut with a rhythm that feels like punctuation. Another finished sentence in a very long report. Another sealed box of dependence headed to someone else's problem. You don't get to rest between crates. There's no pause to admire the work. No moment of acknowledgement. As soon as the dolly rolls out, another mould is placed on your bench. You begin again. Hands aching, eyes stinging. You've stopped wondering how many crates leave the factory each week. You know it's more than enough. You've stopped pretending you're making medicine. You've started calling it what it is, quietly, only to yourself, polished poison. And still, you work. Not because you believe in it, not because you're numb, but because it's the only part of the process where the gum finally stops sticking to you. Where the product, once wrapped, no longer smells like sweat and fear. You envy it, in a way. You watch it vanish into wood and wax and distance. You send it off to ruin someone else's lungs. And you return to your bench, fingers raw, breath shallow, waiting for the next brick. Accidents happen. That's what they say when they don't want to take responsibility. But in the factory, accidents aren't random. They're scheduled, expected, built into the routine like the lunch bell or the weekly quotas. You see it clearly after your first few weeks, that the burns, the falls, the sudden nosebleeds aren't surprises. They're just outcomes. The inevitable friction of a system that grinds people for a living and acts shocked when they bleed. This morning, the boy next to you slices his palm open on a cracked mould handle. The wooden edge sheared into a blade after weeks of wear, and today, it finally gave way. He jerks back surprised, blood dripping onto the drying bricks. He stares at it like it belongs to someone else. You glance at him, then back at your own tray. No one says anything. A supervisor eventually notices, mutters something under his breath, and yanks the boy to his feet. The tray is discarded. The bricks are swept. The boy is sent away. Not to a doctor, to somewhere else. You don't know if he'll be back tomorrow. You don't ask. Later, a woman in the boiling room faints. You don't see it happen, but you hear the thud. It's the kind of sound that pulls your spine straight. Not fear, just awareness. The noise a body makes when it stops cooperating. She's dragged away by 2 others, her feet trailing behind like wet laundry. Someone takes her place before the hour is out. The heat doesn't change. The pace doesn't slow. Whatever she couldn't finish gets reassigned. The gum doesn't care whose hands mould it. And then there's the man near the press who vomits blood. Not much, just enough to stain his tunic and draw a reaction. The overseer looks, frowns, waves him off the floor. The man wipes his mouth with a rag he keeps tucked in his waistband. He doesn't argue. He doesn't protest. He just walks out, hunched slightly, like someone apologising for ruining the carpet. You don't see him again that day. His work is absorbed by those nearby, yours included. You learn quickly not to panic. Panic is not rewarded, it's noted. If you stop what you're doing, if you hesitate, if you express too much concern for someone else, your own productivity drops. And that's what gets measured. Your instinct to help dulls fast, not because you don't care, but because you're trained not to. You still feel something when someone gets hurt. It just happens beneath the surface, where it won't interfere with your hands. The factory doesn't punish accidents, it simply replaces them. The injury is not the interruption, you are. You're the variable that has to be managed, repositioned, evaluated for continued usefulness. If your cough worsens, you're moved to a cooler station. Not for your comfort, but so your output doesn't drop further. If your hands blister too badly, you're given wrapping duty, not out of mercy, but to keep you on the ledger without wasting raw material. The factory isn't cruel, it's pragmatic. Cruelty would require intent. This place runs on indifference. Sometimes someone screams, usually when the injury is sudden, a burn from boiling resin, a deep cut, a collapsed lung. It echoes for a second, sharp and raw, then it's absorbed, folded back into the rhythm of the day like static. No one reacts loudly. Some don't react at all. It's not that they don't hear. They've just heard it before, and they know the scream doesn't change anything. It's not a signal. It's just a noise. You've had your own share, minor mostly. A burn on your forearm that peeled the skin in long strips, a smashed thumb from a slipping mould, a dizzy spell you disguised as a need to urinate, just to sit outside for 5 minutes and taste air that didn't smell like tar. You never reported them. You handled them quietly, the way everyone else does, because reporting them doesn't bring help. It brings attention, and attention is dangerous. Sometimes you wonder how many accidents have happened that no one ever saw, how many workers stumbled in the latrines and were never found, how many slipped behind a stack of crates and weren't noticed until days later, how many collapsed in their dormitory and simply didn't wake up. The factory doesn't keep track of people, it keeps track of output. If the numbers don't drop, the names don't matter. At the end of the day, the injuries get scrubbed away, literally. The floors are swept, the stains are bleached, the blood is washed down the same drains as the gum. No memorials, no pauses. The space is reset, ready for the next shift, the next body, the next accident. You wash your hands in the basin, see the thin cut on your knuckle from earlier, and say nothing. The water turns pink for a second, then clears, like nothing happened at all. You don't expect safety. You don't ask for it. That's not what this job offers. What it offers is consistency, a routine that doesn't change, even when you do. Your body is a tool, and tools wear down. If one breaks, you replace it. If one screams, you wait for it to stop. You shape the gum with fingers already blistered last week, already healing into new skin, already preparing for the next tier. You're not trying to survive the work. You're trying not to be noticed by it. That's as close to protection as you'll get. You're not allowed to touch certain tools, not because they're dangerous or because you haven't been trained, but because of caste. You understand this immediately, even if no one explains it. No one needs to. It's written in how people move around each other, how water is passed without contact, how benches are arranged to ensure just enough separation between bodies that shouldn't share sweat. You came here thinking labour might blur those lines. It doesn't. If anything, it sharpens them. The Brahmin boy doesn't work with the gum. He fetches water, carries messages, sometimes checks weight tallies under the supervision of a clerk. His clothes are cleaner, though still worn. His fingers are long and uncracked. He doesn't speak to you, not directly. If he needs you to move, he gestures. You pretend not to notice. It doesn't matter. He has authority, though none of it comes from strength or skill. The caste ledger is older than the company's. The Muslim worker is assigned to a different room. You see him during meals, rarely during shifts. His tools are separate, his station isolated, not by law, by arrangement. Someone somewhere decided it would be easier that way. Fewer complaints, fewer risks of contamination. You don't know what would happen if your work touched his. You don't ask. He doesn't either. You both have learned that curiosity is a liability, and equality is something that only travels one way, upward. There are sweepers who sleep in a different part of the compound, closer to the drains, farther from the storage rooms. You hear them sometimes after hours, coughing, scraping waste into buckets, muttering to each other in low voices. Their job is to clean what everyone else leaves behind. No one says it, but you've seen the looks. No one shares utensils with them. No one sits on the same mat. If they bathe, they do it last. If they die, they're replaced without a word. The factory doesn't enforce caste. It doesn't have to. It simply accommodates it, builds around it, profits from it. Tasks are assigned not based on ability, but on acceptability. A low-caste worker handles the gum. A higher caste clerk handles the numbers. Everyone's body is worth something different. The British don't question the structure because it's convenient. They can delegate responsibility while avoiding accountability. It's the perfect system, violence without visible hands. You once saw a worker reprimanded for using the wrong ladle, not because he used it incorrectly, but because he shouldn't have touched it at all. It belonged to a station further up the caste ladder, and even washing it afterward didn't erase the infraction. He was reassigned the next day, moved to cleaning trays instead of shaping bricks. No explanation, just a shift. You understood the message. Not all contamination is chemical. The food reflects it too. At lunch, workers sit in clusters, not assigned, but understood. You don't sit with the Brahmins, they don't sit with the sweepers. If someone forgets and crosses a boundary, there's no confrontation, just a slow collective withdrawal. A bowl placed a little farther away, a conversation that quiets. You learn to sit with your own, not because you believe in the system, but because breaking it only punishes the ones lowest in it. You've started to internalize the boundaries, not proudly, but instinctively. You pass tools a certain way. You leave water vessels untouched if they aren't yours. You wipe down your area more thoroughly if someone of a different caste worked there earlier in the day. You're not afraid of disease. You're afraid of consequence. If someone complains, even without proof, your record takes the damage. And your record is your only protection from replacement. The overseer doesn't get involved in caste matters. If someone protests, he shrugs. If someone refuses to work with someone else, he simply rearranges the roster. Efficiency, he calls it. Harmony. The word covers what it needs to. It's not his job to dismantle the system. It's his job to keep the numbers clean and the floor quiet. As long as production continues, as long as no one strikes or collapses en masse, the structure remains untouched. You wonder sometimes if caste was always this functional. You remember elders in your village saying it was once about duty, dharma, spiritual roles, not labour categories. But here, it's just economics, a mechanism for sorting who gets what pain, who gets which job, and who gets to breathe slightly cleaner air while telling others what to do. The factory has no gods. It just monetizes the ones outside its gates. At night, when you lie down on your shared mat, you hear whispers from other dormitories, gossip, complaints, sometimes jokes. But no one talks about caste directly. It's too obvious, like the heat, like the smell. It's not hidden, it's just constant. You fall asleep knowing exactly where you stand and where others stand in relation to you. That knowledge is heavier than your limbs, heavier than the day's labour. You don't dream of equality. You don't even dream of reversal. You dream of neutrality, of a place where your hands don't stain differently, depending on who's watching, of a job that notices your work more than your name. You know that place doesn't exist, not here, not now, but the thought keeps you moving, just enough to get through the next shift, the next tray, the next quiet reinforcement of a hierarchy older than even the empire that profits from it. There's a number for everything, a target for how many bricks you should press, how many trays you should fill, how many bundles you should tie. It doesn't matter how you feel that day. It doesn't matter if your hands are blistered, or your joints swollen, or your lungs feel like they're lined with tar. The quota is the quota. It arrives each morning without ceremony, written in chalk on the wall, or mumbled by a clerk with tired eyes. It does not change, you do. That's the point. You tell yourself it's manageable. At first it is. You pace yourself. You measure your strength. But eventually your body stops cooperating. Too much heat, too little rest, too many hours repeating the same motion until your fingers feel like wooden pegs instead of flesh. You slow down without meaning to. That's when it happens. A missed count, a delay, a tray that dries too fast or too unevenly. You hope no one notices. They always do. The overseer doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. He marks it down in the ledger. A small note, a line across your number. Sometimes a symbol you don't recognize. A shorthand for failure that carries more weight than words. You don't see the fine right away. You feel it at the end of the week when your wages are handed out and come back thinner, than you expected. You don't get an explanation, just fewer coins in your palm and a nod that says, this is the cost of being imperfect. The wages themselves are almost insulting. A few annas. Enough for rice, maybe a bit of oil, but not enough to build anything. Not enough to plan. The coins feel temporary in your hand, like they'll melt if you grip them too long. Some workers send their pay home, others spend it on tobacco or betel nut, not because they can afford to, but because they can't afford to feel every hour of the day with nothing to take the edge off. You save what you can, knowing it won't matter much when the next fine comes. Fines are levied for everything, not just low output, for cracked bricks, for spilled gum, for tardiness, even if the bell rang 5 seconds early, for damaged tools, even if those tools were already splintering when you picked them up. Once you saw a worker fined for speaking during rapping, though no one had heard him say a word. It didn't matter. The accusation stuck. The deduction followed. The books are always balanced, even if it's your stomach that stays empty. You start to understand that the factory doesn't need to punish you with violence. The numbers do it better. The numbers are impersonal, silent, permanent. They're recorded in ink that doesn't fade and never forgives. You could work 6 days without error and still find your total docked on the 7th because of a mistake made in passing, one you didn't even notice. You protest if you're bold, but there's no appeal process. The ledger doesn't argue, it remembers. You begin to work differently, not harder, more carefully. You second guess each motion. You pause before setting bricks in place. You check weights twice. You waste time trying not to waste material. You'd think this would make you more efficient. It doesn't. It just makes you slower, which leads to more missed quotas, which leads to more fines. The numbers don't care about your caution. They only track the product that crosses the line, stamped, wrapped, and counted. Some workers find ways to cheat. They cut corners, mix batches, rush through quality checks. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When they're caught, they're removed, quietly, without fuss. You never see them again. You wonder if they're reassigned or sent away entirely. You don't ask. Asking is dangerous. Curiosity carries no reward here, only risk. You've heard that there's a bonus for exceeding quota, that someone once earned a full rupee extra for surpassing expectations, but no one you know has ever received it. It's one of those stories that floats around the dormitories at night, like tales of escape or jobs with better air. A story you tell yourself when the numbers get too heavy. A fiction you whisper to your own exhausted hands. There's a page in the ledger for each of you, your number at the top, columns for dates, output, fines, infractions, payments. You've never seen the full page, but you've seen it held in the overseer's hand, flipping forward as he checks one line, then another. You are not a person in that book. You are a trend, a slope, a pattern of diminishing efficiency and increasing correction. One day, the slope will dip too far, and then your page ends. The numbers do not kill you. Not directly. They don't strike or slice. They press, downward, constantly, like the air on your chest when you lie in the dormitory and can't quite get a full breath. Like the arithmetic of fatigue. Every mistake is a subtraction. Every hour is a fraction. Your body is a calculation you no longer control. You bend under it, slowly, quietly, until bending becomes your posture. And still the ledger turns, the pen scratches, the ink dries, your number stays until it doesn't. Evening arrives late, not because of the sun, it's been sinking behind the factory walls for over an hour, but because the workday doesn't end until someone else decides it has. The bell rings with less energy than in the morning, as if the metal itself is tired of announcing more labour. You stand with effort, not all at once. First the hands, pulling back from the gum and feeling heavier than they should. Then the knees, slow to unlock, joints grinding with the memory of hours spent fully tight. Finally the spine, not straightened, just unfolded enough to pretend it still can. You rise into your own ache like a man slipping into a coat 3 sizes too small. Your body does not feel like your own anymore. It belongs to the work now. Every joint stiff, every tendon stretched to its limit. Your fingers stay curled slightly, as if still gripping tools, and your shoulders slope inward like they're bracing for more weight. You carry the day with you, not metaphorically, but literally, in your limbs, in your lungs, in the film of resin that clings to your skin like a second, stickier version of yourself. The resin is in everything, in the lines of your palms, in the folds of your tunic, in the space behind your ears where sweat has pooled and dried and pooled again. You can feel the layers of it, built up from shift after shift, no longer entirely removable. The smell is sharper at the end of the day, less sweet, more sour. Like the gum has fermented on your body. You catch whiffs of it when you breathe too deeply, which you don't do often anymore. You begin the walk back to the dormitory in silence. Everyone does. There is nothing to say. The words you used to have, thought, jokes, curses, complaints, have been sanded down into grunts and nods. Even those take effort. You walk in a line that isn't really a line, just a string of bodies drifting toward the same destination. Your feet move without instruction. The path is carved into your souls by now, worn into your bones. The factory doesn't watch you go. It never does. Once you've served your shift, you become invisible again. Not gone, just no longer interesting. You imagine it sighing as the last worker exits, the way a parasite rests after feeding. It will call for you again tomorrow. It always does. The compound is dim. The sun has dipped below the outer wall, and what light remains is thick and grey. The air outside is cooler than inside, but not clean. It smells of burned oil, distant firewood, and the slow decay of 1,000 workdays leaking into the ground. You inhale and feel your chest rattle. Not enough to alarm, just enough to remind. The dirt path under your feet is familiar. You walk it every evening, but tonight your legs resist more than usual. The backs of your knees ache from crouching. Your calves feel tight, overstretched. Your thighs tremble slightly with each step, a quiet rebellion against the repetition. You consider stopping, just for a moment, just to sit. But you don't. No one does. There's nowhere to sit between the factory and the dormitory that doesn't feel like surrender. Around you, others limp or drag one foot or clutch a shoulder that seized up sometime in the afternoon. No one offers help, not because they're unkind, but because they're spent. There's nothing left to give. The only mercy here is momentum. Keep moving. Don't collapse. Don't give the body time to realise how badly it wants to. The cough comes back as you walk. Not constant, just a reminder. A dry tickle in the throat. You press your sleeve to your mouth and let it out in silence. The way you've learned to. Drawing attention now would only mean questions, or worse, indifference. You taste the resin again, bitter and metallic. Your tongue feels coated, as if something thick has settled across it during the day and refuses to be swallowed. You glance down and see that your hands are trembling. Not from cold, from fatigue. The kind of fatigue that lives deeper than the muscles, somewhere in the marrow. Your nails are blackened with gum, your knuckles red from rubbing it off. The stains are permanent now. Your hands no longer look like tools. They look like warnings. By the time the dormitory comes into view, your legs have taken over. Your thoughts have fallen behind. The building is low, rectangular, flickering with the dull glow of oil lamps inside. It isn't comforting. It just exists, like a trough at the end of a long road. You know you'll lie down there. You know you'll wake up there. You know you'll return to the factory from there. The routine is not calming. It is simply known. You pass a few others already sitting on the steps outside, heads bowed, arms resting on knees. One is wiping his face with a rag. Another is rubbing at a shoulder that refuses to loosen. No one speaks. You nod. They nod back. It's the only conversation you're capable of. the language of stiffness and silence. You reach the doorway and pause, not to pray, not to reflect, just to catch your breath before folding yourself back into the shared dark. Inside, there is no comfort, no peace, just mats, just sweat, just noise and heat and breath. But it's where you're expected to go, so you do. Stiff, stained, still breathing. For now, you call it home because there's no better word. But it isn't. It's a shelter, if you're generous. A long, narrow room with a tin roof and no windows. Just slits in the wall that let in air thick with heat and mosquitoes. You sleep on a mat or something like it. A rectangle of woven fibres, worn thin from years of bodies, pressing down night after night. If you arrived late to the dormitory, you might not even have that. Then it's the floor, hard-packed dirt that remembers every spine that's ever tried to forget where it was lying. The room is always full. 20, sometimes 30 men, wedged together in a space that would feel crowded with half that number. There's no privacy, no silence, no space to turn without brushing someone's leg, arm, or breath. You learn to sleep narrow, facing one direction. You learn to keep your possessions, few as they are, tucked inside your tunic or tied around your waist. You don't suspect theft, not exactly. You just understand that anything left unguarded belongs to everyone. That's how need works here. The air never cools properly. At night, the heat shifts from blistering to stagnant. It clings to the walls, the floor, your chest. You sweat through your clothes even while motionless. Damp patches blooming across your back and neck like rot. The roof traps everything. Body heat, breath, the sourness of the day's work rising from everyone's skin. If a breeze slips through, it's not a comfort. It's a reminder of what the room should feel like, but doesn't. You try to sleep. Sometimes you succeed. Most nights, you hover somewhere between exhaustion and discomfort. You close your eyes, but your mind keeps pacing. You hear everything. The wheeze of the man 2 mats down, the constant scratch of someone chasing fleas, the soft, hopeless crying of a boy who hasn't yet learned to do it silently. Someone snores. Someone mutters in a dream. Someone coughs, the kind of cough that sounds like it's been waiting all day to come out. You tell yourself it's background noise. Eventually, it is. The mosquitoes are relentless. They whine in your ears like the overseer's bell. High-pitched, inescapable, just close enough to drive you mad. You swat them away, knowing you'll miss. You pull a rag over your face. It's damp, but it helps a little. You think about nets, about ointments, about citronella leaves your grandmother used to burn. None of that exists here. Here you bleed a little every night and wake up itchy in the morning. No one talks about malaria, but everyone knows someone who left with fever and never came back. You sleep in the same clothes you worked in. There's no change, no clean set waiting folded in a corner. You lie in your own stink and in everyone else's. You breathe through your mouth when you can, through your shirt when you can't. You used to care. You used to feel shame at the smell. But here, shame has no audience. Everyone stinks the same. The odour is not a flaw. It's the badge of survival. Even when your eyes close, your body doesn't truly rest. Your hands twitch in your sleep, still curling as if gripping a paddle. Your legs cramp from crouching too long, knees locked in half-bent agony. You wake suddenly and feel like you've been kneeling for hours. You shift your weight and try again. This is not rest, it's a pause, a reset button pulled tight by necessity. The factory has no use for well-rested workers. It just needs workers who don't die before quota. The dreams you do have aren't peaceful. You dream of trays tipping, of gum that won't mould, of an overseer's face hovering just out of reach. You dream of being late, of miscounting, of opening your wage pouch to find it empty. You've even dreamt of freedom once or twice, but it came dressed in unfamiliar clothes and speaking a language you couldn't understand. Mostly, you dream of repetition, of doing it again, and again, and again. When you wake, there's no sense of relief, no feeling of being refreshed, Just the dull awareness that you're still here, still horizontal, still soar in the same places. Sometimes you're surprised to see that it's only been a few hours. Sometimes you don't know if you slept at all. It doesn't matter. The bell will ring soon. Your muscles will protest, your eyes will burn, but you'll stand anyway. That's what the body does here. It rises because it must. The others stir one by one. A hand searching for sandals. A whispered curse. Someone stretching and cracking every joint like branches in a windstorm. You join them in ritual. You splash water on your face, not because it wakes you, but because it's what comes next. The routine is sacred now, not out of belief, but because it's the only thing holding you together, the only thing more permanent than the pain. This is your reward for surviving the day, not peace, not comfort, not even stillness. Just the chance to do it all over again, to crawl through another shift, another quota, another tally in a book that will never include your name. You don't expect more. You've stopped expecting anything at all. You sleep in a room built for bodies, not people. A room that forgets you, even as you lie inside it. But you're still here, still moving, still part of the system, even if barely. And tomorrow when the bell rings, you will rise from your mat, or your patch of dirt, and walk back toward the factory. Not because you're strong, not because you're brave, but because this is what's left. Because the alternative is hunger. Because the world outside the gates is colder than the one you already know. The cough starts as a tickle, not deep, not alarming, just enough to clear your throat more than usual. At first you think it's the heat, or the dust, or the steam from the boiling room seeping through the compound seams. You drink more water, though it tastes of rust and old iron. You chew slowly to avoid swallowing air. You avoid speaking unless necessary, which isn't hard. No one talks much anymore, but the tickle doesn't go away. It deepens, settles in. You aren't alone. Everyone's coughing now, some more than others. The boy 2 mats over wheezes in his sleep. The man in your work row hacks into his sleeve every half hour, turning away, so the overseer doesn't notice. It becomes a rhythm of the place, Rukigs, like the creak of the carts, the scrape of trays, the ring of the quota bell, the sound of lungs emptying without permission. Some coughs are wet, others are dry. A few sound like they come from somewhere deeper than the body. You start to notice who's getting worse. At first you joke about it, quietly, bitterly. You say it's the factory's way of giving you something to keep. A souvenir made of breath and phlegm. A gift for your service. A reminder. The others chuckle when they have the strength, not because it's funny, but because there's no other acceptable reaction. If you don't laugh at it, you might start fearing it. And if you fear it, you might stop working. That's the real threat. You've heard stories. Everyone has. People who coughed too hard and were sent home, not to recover, just to disappear. A young man from the boiling room who hacked up blood one morning and never returned. A woman from the packing tables who stopped speaking altogether and was taken from the dormitory during the night. No one sees them again. No one knows where they go. Some say they're sent back to their villages. Others say there's a shed behind the storage yard where they're left to die quietly. You hope they're exaggerations, but you know they're not. There's no doctor, not here. If someone collapses, a supervisor checks their pulse. If it's still there, they're dragged to the edge of the room and told to wait until they can stand again. If it isn't, a cart is summoned, covered in canvas, always moving briskly, always returning empty. The body is gone before anyone can ask a question. The station is cleaned, the tray reissued. The day continues. Grief is too inefficient to be part of the routine. You start spitting more often, into rags, into corners, into the dirt behind the latrine. The mucus is darker now, brown, sometimes black, sometimes streaked faintly red. You stop looking at it. You tell yourself it's from the gum, all that sticky resin clinging to your throat, lining your teeth, coating your tongue with a bitterness that won't leave. But there's something else, Something sour under the sweet. You taste metal, then salt, then nothing at all. Breathing becomes effort, not all at once, gradually. At first, you just feel short of breath when you stand too quickly, then when you crouch too long, then all the time. You start timing your movements, conserving oxygen like it's coin. You hold your breath through the worst of the fumes. Exhale slowly. Pace your stirring so you don't overextend. You become a master of half breaths. You move through the day like someone underwater. Some nights you wake coughing. It's not loud. It's not even painful. But it keeps you from sleeping. And that's worse. You lie still in the dark, listening to the chorus of lungs around you. A symphony of damage, an orchestra of expiration. You wonder how long it takes before someone notices you're getting worse. You wonder what happens when they do. You know you won't be told. You'll just be reassigned or removed. You stop joking. The others do too. No one talks about the cough anymore. Not because it's gone, but because it's too present, too real, too shared. It becomes part of the background, like the gum, like the fines, like the overseer's footsteps. You cover your mouth when you cough, not out of politeness, but to hide it, to make it look smaller than it is, to protect the illusion that you're still fine, still useful, still above the threshold where people get noticed. You think about the outside world more often now, not longingly, analytically. You try to remember the last time you felt air that didn't burn a little on the way in. You imagine walking through a field without coughing, sitting by a stove without choking, speaking a full sentence without your voice catching. These thoughts come unbidden, not as hope, but as measurement. You are cataloguing your distance from what you used to consider normal. Your hands still work, your back still bends, your eyes still focus. That's enough for the factory. That's all they need to keep your name in the ledger. The rest, your lungs, your throat, your ribs, those aren't measured. Not until they stop. You carry the cough like contraband, tucked into your chest, hidden between breaths. No one confiscates it. No one acknowledges it. It moves with you, grows in you, smuggled past every checkpoint because it's invisible until it isn't. And when the day ends, when you lie down again on your mat and turn your face to the wall, you feel it settle in your chest like a weight. Not sharp, not sudden, just certain. You cough once softly. No one turns, no one speaks, everyone has one now. It's just a matter of how long you'll be able to carry it before it carries you. Years pass, not counted in celebrations or seasons, but in bricks packed, fines docked, and coughs deepening. Eventually, the work stops. Not all at once, not dramatically. You just disappear from the roster, like so many others. One day someone else is crouched in your place. They use your paddle. They inherit your mat. They don't ask where you went. No one does. The factory doesn't announce departures. It simply reassigns. Your body is buried or burned, or left somewhere quiet. Maybe in a ditch just outside the compound. Maybe in your home village, returned under the cover of silence and shame. Maybe nowhere at all, just gone, folded into the soil, into memory, into the dust rising from the road that brought you here. There's no marker, no funeral, no prayer, no letter sent. You are subtracted cleanly, like a miswritten figure corrected in ink. And yet the crates continue. Hundreds of them, thousands, still leaving the factory long after your hands have stopped working. They arrive in warehouses in Rangoon, in Canton, in London's East India docks. They're offloaded by dockhands, who will never know your name. Opened by merchants who only care about the weight. Sold by men in waistcoats, who speak of margins and markets, while their hands stay clean. Smoked in dens and parlours, consumed by strangers with cravings you never had the luxury to afford. Eventually, someone writes about the factory. Not a worker, a scholar perhaps, or a visiting colonial officer with time on his hands. He writes of logistics, of supply chains, of the remarkable efficiency of the Patna opium operation. He mentions the number of crates produced each year. He cites revenue figures. He praises the precision of the ledgers. He includes no names, or if he does, they belong to overseers and administrators. Men who never touched the gum. Men who walked clean corridors and wore white shirts. Men who only ever observed. Decades later, the factory becomes history. The buildings remain, crumbling a little more each year. Eventually, they're preserved. Not for their cruelty, for their craftsmanship. The walls are restored, the ledgers displayed behind glass. The crates, the very ones you packed, sit on pedestals, admired for their uniformity, their branding, their export stamps. Tour guides point out how advanced the process was, how streamlined, how ahead of its time. No one mentions the lungs that bled to make it possible. Your name is not in the archive. Your number might be, scribbled in a margin, attached to a tally, surrounded by columns of outputs and deductions. But the number doesn't say who you were. It doesn't say how old you were when your back gave out, or how long your cough followed you home at night. It doesn't mention the blisters, the burns, the meals skipped to pay off a debt that never shrank. It records only that you worked, and then that you stopped. There is no statue, no plaque, no photograph. The empire does not immortalize the tools it breaks. It forgets them on purpose. That's part of the system. The clean disappearance, the polite amnesia. The history books record the trade, the treaties, the profits, and the wars that followed. But not the hands that packed the poison, not the lips that tasted metal, not the men and women and children who made addiction into product and pain into arithmetic. You are not remembered, but you are everywhere. In the bricks behind glass, in the ledgers that scholars scan for trends, in the air that still lingers around the old walls, faintly sweet, faintly bitter, in the cough that lives on in your children, or in someone else's, passed down like debt. You are not the face of empire. You are the breath behind it. You are the body that made it possible to smile. Somewhere, a teacher says, your labour helped fuel British prestige. That opium was once a pillar of imperial success. That factories like Patna kept the trade alive for decades. And in a way, they're right, but they don't say what it cost. They don't say whose ribs cracked under the quotas, whose hands shaped the last bricks before going still, whose absence meant nothing because the next day brought another arrival, another mat, another pair of lungs. This was your legacy, not a story, not a record, but a rhythm. You entered the system, you fed it, you were digested. The product lived on, it always does. No one tells your tale because it doesn't have an arc, only a cycle. There is no moment of triumph, no rebellion, no escape, only work, illness, find, sleep, and more work. You were never the point, just the process. And yet, without you, there is no factory, no crates, no profit, no history to display. The names they do remember are built on the backs of those they don't. Your breath filled the room so theirs wouldn't have to. Your hands blistered so theirs could hold pens. Your body broke so the empire could stand straighter. There's no need to pretend otherwise. You won't be remembered. But that doesn't mean you weren't essential. It just means you were inconvenient to remember. Your name isn't on the box, but the box doesn't exist without you. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. If you're still awake, thank you for giving space, however quietly, to a life that was never meant to be remembered. Not all histories are loud. Some exist only in breath and blisters, in numbers inked beside vanished names. But they built the world we live in, brick by brick, cough by cough. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet, bitter truths, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with the next forgotten life you'd like us to walk through together. And if you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories. Sleep well.